Hello, guys, and welcome. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. Our Obsessed with God podcast is now up on all major podcast providers. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on Podbean, it's on Google Podcasts, it's on every single podcast platform you can think of. So if you've been watching this on YouTube, you no longer have to go and subscribe to it on one of those platforms, and you'll just have the new episodes uploaded to you, or downloaded rather, the moment that they come out. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Obsessed Marketing and Sales Solutions. If you're one of those people that's listening to this podcast wondering why is a marketing company speaking to me before we speak about spirituality, it's because that's what my wife Lane and I do for a living. We take people's ideas, their businesses, their brands, and their products, and we help them take them to the world and help them to make the living that they should be making with them. We do a lot with spiritual-based businesses. If you are a Reiki healer, if you are a spiritual healer, if you are any sort of natural, holistic, anything to do with spirituality, and you are having a hard time getting your name, your product, your services out there, contact us. We can help you get it out into the world. We can help you start to make that impact that you know you can make that has been hard for you to do. A lot of people in our lifestyle have a hard time getting their business, their brand, their products out there. There's a real stigma with some people that you shouldn't be making money with your products and services. This is incorrect. You need to have a strong business so you can have the most impact that you can on the world. You need to build that business so that your big, strong voice that's working for positivity can get out there, and people will know who you are and they will listen to the things that you need to get done. My guest on the podcast today is, she's been a friend of mine for a long time. Her name is Shannon. She lives on Vancouver Island. She professionally is a turnover manager in the oil and gas industry. And Shannon is on her 4th year of sobriety. Shannon is, again, she's a very good friend of mine whose story is very parallel to mine. I really enjoy speaking to Shannon. She and I have had the same problems, the same walk, the same search for solutions, and the same what seems to it sometimes being just beating your head against a wall, trying to make it stop, trying to make yourself better. And I loved having this conversation with Shannon. I really think that I needed this conversation more than Shannon did. And we spoke about everything from how Shannon became sober, her relationship with God when she found God, her name for God. Her name for God is amazing. Shannon calls God whatevs. I've never heard God be called whatevs before. It's an amazing story. She's an amazing person. She's a wonderful story to tell. She tries to live her best life every single day, and I love her dearly, and I respect her dearly for it. Without further ado, here's my friend Shannon. Enjoy. We as seekers are all searching for that divine experience with our God. Listen in as we discuss different people's stories and perspectives about God from their walk of life and from their part of the world. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. And we're live, Shannon. We did it.
We're live. Okay.
We finally got together. How are you?
I am a little nervous, but nothing crazy.
That's good.
Excited.
Are you nervous about what you're going to talk about, or just that there's a camera in your face and now you got to talk about it?
Camera in the face.
Yeah.
That's probably it. Not about what I'm going to talk about.
That's fair enough. Maybe tell everyone, Shannon, what your name is, where you're from, and what you do.
My name is Shannon S. I'm from Vancouver Island, and I am a turnover manager in the oil and gas industry.
Wonderful. So, like I said in the introduction, I've known Shannon for a pile of years. Shannon's story is very parallel to mine. This is my 10th year of sobriety, Shannon.
It's a decade.
10 years of sobriety.
Decade.
I know, it's so crazy. And so I was sober for a few years before Shannon found sobriety, and maybe we'll start there, Shani, with your story with sobriety. Maybe would you speak about maybe when you became sober and why you became sober, or what started you on that path to sobriety?
What started me on the path? So I became sober November 17th, 2017. But started me on the path to sobriety was probably like a decade before that. I probably knew that, I knew I had issues with alcohol for probably over 20 years. And there was many a time that I thought if I just, read the right book or did the right yoga or went to the right therapist or figured that kind of stuff out, that I would either get sober or I wouldn't have to get sober, like somewhere around there. When I finally took the plunge was after, a decade of just or 2 decades of destroying myself, internally, spiritually. And even though I hadn't got to a point where I'd lost a house or lost my job or anything, I was emotionally bankrupt. And it took one final crazy, stupid fight with my partner at the time. And I decided that moment that I was going to change my entire life. Not that moment, the next day, obviously. Mm-hmm. I actually think I was talking to you on the phone the night. I think I called you and Lane the night that happened. I think it was the next day I decided when I sobered up, I was going to be sober. And I remember kind of also the moment of when it was really solidified, and it actually does tie into my experience with God too. And I knew it from like the top of my head down to my feet that I was going to go into rehab. And I cashed out every cent I had, borrowed some money off of a friend, and I put myself into rehab at 35.
That's amazing. What you said there was the same problem I did that nobody speaks about in sobriety, because everyone says like the markers to drug use, the markers to sex addiction, the markers to alcohol, the markers to being a degenerate gambler are you lost everything.
Yeah.
Like your haircut can't be high and tight, and you can't be clean cut and still have a problem. And that was like the slipstream I lived in, was like, I don't have a problem. I'm high functioning. Fuck you. I can do whatever I want. And yeah, I assume you had the same problem I did. And the more time goes on, the more I thought that was a rarity. And the majority of alcoholics and degenerate mutants that I know are that way. They're the people that find sobriety. It's the people that, don't, that carry on down that path. And that was a very hard one for me.
It was hard for me too. And also my job, as you know, like the career that I was in at the time really helped me continue being a degenerate without having any real consequences. I had money. I could get on a plane at any time, leave the disaster of my home, get on a plane, go to work, and then come back. And like my whole 20s, since I was 24, I was just drinking and traveling and working, and I was able to not fall because I could afford to be a wreck. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was like what you're saying about airplanes. Like it's a strange problem to have, because when you start to get sober and you complain to people that you were coming to realizations jet setting, they're like, yeah. What?
I know.
But that was my life. It was like, I was flying to Vancouver for a meal, and then I'd fly home because I don't want to spend the night here because I'm getting freaked out and I need to go home. You know what I mean? Yeah. My life was chasing one nervous feeling away with another nervous feeling It didn't matter what
Yes.
it was. It was a bottle, or it was a girl, or it was an activity, or it was a whatever, but it was never,
Yeah.
that was it's funny you say that, because about like that lifestyle and having it together, but you're jet setting and flying away from your problems, because I did a really good job of that for a long, long time too, Shannon.
I did it so well that when I went into rehab, I thought this was another instance of me doing that. So when I went into rehab, one of my biggest issues that I had like brought up was like, is this just me? Because I also, I had only hit and I'm only I hit an emotional and spiritual rock bottom. And because I didn't have the material rock bottom, I also had that like imposter syndrome a little bit going on when I was in there. But also, and my mom was like, when I told her I was going into rehab, she's like, I think you're being a little dramatic. Like, just story of my life, just I'm being dramatic. And then she said, you're just running away from your problems, right? So then I get in there and I'm like telling this counselor, I'm like, what if this is just me like looking for a vacation, running away? And she's like, there's a difference between like running from your problems and like running towards them. So I thought that was just another one of my things, like getting on a plane and going to Iceland or something.
But isn't that so scrambled? Because that's how your brain reconciles it. Like
Yeah.
you only understand a running pace. You don't understand the direction.
Yes.
That's, you know what I mean? Like, you're just running and you're like,
Yes.
but the problem is that I found for myself is that mid run you were trying to reconcile or trying to figure out what your direction was, but it wasn't, it was dark and you're wearing blindfold. Like, how do you know where you're going? You're just running. Yeah, I had the exact same thing, and it's funny. It's not funny, but it's funny when I speak to people that become sober, because that's a hard thing to say to a normal person who's like, I go to my job and my life is great and I have it pulled together, and I look at them and I'm like, how did you do that without a counselor?
Yes.
Like, who taught you those skills? I didn't learn
Right?
those things. Like, that's unbelievable. But Shannon, can you tell me the exact moment in your life that you experienced God, Spirit, the universe, and its divinity, whatever it is you want to call it? You either heard it, you felt it, you saw it, you ascended to it, you became it, whatever that experience was to you. Can you explain that story?
So when I first felt it, like I felt knowing, I didn't actually realize it was God until later. So I'm going to tell you the felt knowing, and then maybe like when I realized it. I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of when I felt it as an adult, because I think there was many moments as a child that I would have felt God and known God and been one with God. But when I can really consciously remember, I felt knowing, and I didn't know it was God. It just felt like an inner knowing. Was literally. So I'm with my partner still to this day, but at the time I was in a really, I was obviously an active alcoholic, and a lot of toxic stuff was going on, and we weren't in a good place, and we got into a huge fight, awful fight, and that was the night I called you and Lane, crying and drunk. And the next day or the day after, I can't remember when it was, I needed my bank card back from him. And part of me was like, I'll ask for my bank card and he'll come back and then we'll talk and everything is going to be fine. And I saw him drive past my window slowly and just throw my bank card out the window, and I can still see it like do this little flip and land in the middle of the road. And me being who I am, of like, oh, just a mess. Like normally I'd want to like run out there or call or like, oh my God, like what is this? And I had from like the top of my head down to my feet the sense of peace and calm and support, like comfort. I don't know. It's hard to explain. And in that moment, I felt something bigger than me. And I had my mom come over and stay with me because I was a disaster. And I remember I was messaging a girl that I knew that was sober. And from that moment down, things just unfolded. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment of like kind of surrender to what I didn't know was, I didn't realize it was God at the moment. Within, I think it was like 4 days, I was had found the means and was in rehab. Mm-hmm. So I didn't realize that was God until I think it was probably about a month later when I was in rehab, and I was struggling really hard to connect my higher power. I've always believed in a God, but I was having a hard time connecting my higher power with my sobriety. Like I was like, why does God even care if I'm sober? Like, that's like, he's busy or something, like sobriety. And it was just, we kept on exploring my higher power and how I experienced it. And I was in my room in rehab with my roommate and this other girl. And I realized like that moment came back to me really fast. And I had the same feeling. And then I realized it was my higher power. And I like threw up my hands and said, whatevs, because I didn't know what God was or what it had to do with my sobriety or even my life. And I just stopped trying to figure it out. And I just said, whatevs. And then now my God is called whatevs with a capital W. So whatevs willing, this will make sense. But that was when in my adult life, I remember feeling God. And then there's so many experiences from that.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing that you're still with the person that facilitated that experience for you. Like that was facilitated for you. Like like your card being tossed out the window was that was an act that was facilitated for you to have that experience, right? Like that's what happened for you. An action happened, a reaction happened. Because like when you said that he drove your card back and threw it out the window, I think that's amazing because it's funny. But I wouldn't have done that. I'd have been like, kick rocks. Like a person physically had to say like, for whatever reason, he was pulled to, you know what I mean? Facilitate an experience for you that turned into the next thing.
I love that.
Your partner facilitating that experience for you. It's an amazing thing because the one thing that has been it's obviously not everyone's experience, but the one thing that has really been a common thread with a lot of people that I've spoken to is that something facilitated it. Like it's not there's a couple instances I've spoken to people where they said like, I found God, and they were like, you know, buying groceries, something strange, like something hit them in the head. And they were like, oh, but most people, which is a sort of a theory I subscribe to, is like, you have to be moved for the good or the bad, one way or the other. You don't go through life experiencing the same things and receiving the same outcome. You have to be pushed to an edge, or you have to push someone to an edge to get a reaction out of them to facilitate that, whatever happened. And, you know, you're fortunate that you still have that person in your life, because most people don't have that. It's usually the end of something and then they carry on from, you know, I don't want to say everybody, but obviously the people I've spoken to. But when you were in rehab, were you serious about God then, or like where you said your God's name became whatevs because it was? And I should say too, I'm not a person that gets precious about the name of God, because I think it's arrogant that we even, you know, gave a name to a thing that can't be named. But from that moment on, were you like, you were all in? You're like, I understand what that is. I'm a total disaster, but I understand what that is, and I know that with that I can do some good now.
Yeah, and there was quite a shift because I've always believed in a higher power, God. I was brought up Catholic, not really practicing, but I've always believed in a God, but I never met God. Like I never could connect with really connect with God. So from that moment on, that's when it started like a relationship with God that I'm sometimes attentive to and sometimes not. It's an ebb and flow for me. But that was from that point on, like I felt and nurtured and connected with God, like a God that was all loving. Like it was a felt sense that there was something bigger than me, not just like, okay, I'm sure I know there's a God, but like this God actually could connect with me. Like was there in a tangible, whether tangible or not, but like a felt sense. And then, you know, like I was in a rehab, so obviously, well, not obviously, I should say, there's a 12 steps are a big thing in the rehab that I was in. So my sobriety was intertwined with a higher power as well. So I really got to like nurture that new awareness that I had with God in this beautiful little bubble of messy, crazy, awful experiences, but this safe bubble. And I was also kind of pulled towards, I had an experience in rehab where I had to kind of I was protecting a counselor that I had from not quite handling, like not quite dealing with me the way that I should have been dealt with. Like I like confiding in me like about other residents or whatever. And so I was kind of protecting the system for the first like month because I was like, and then I wasn't getting put into the trauma therapy and all this stuff that I needed to get put into. And I was feeling responsible for it, which was just a whole fucked up thing for my childhood. But so I was protecting it. And then I finally went to go into a chapel to do my 5th step with a lady. And she was a counselor that only did spiritual stuff with residents or whatever. I can't even remember what we called ourselves. And I was in the little chapel and I broke down and told her everything that was happening and what I'm almost out of here. I've only got I could only pay for a month and a half, and the first month I was in there, I didn't get into anything that I needed to, and this was happening, and it was in a chapel, and she became my counselor there, and I ended up getting a month and a half more stay in there and being able to do a whole bunch of things that I wouldn't have been able to do if that wouldn't have happened to me. And so she's incredibly spiritual. Like that's her she's like the chaplain or counselor there that's the chaplain. So I really got to explore and nurture that God with her. So it kind of all like in this magical way just unfolded in a way that I needed it to, because I couldn't afford to stay there for longer than I had already had. So that to me is one of like divine interventions that I've had, and really felt and believed that it was when I stopped trying to control everything, because I try to control everything in my life and manipulate it and manage it, and I know better and try to save people from things. And when I let go and surrender over to something greater than me, then things happen that I could have never, ever, ever come up with. And when I'm controlling and manipulating the world and all that, I block out that stuff from my God.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of it was kind of like this whole journey in that 3 months that really got me to know my God.
Do you have examples of, like, where you said when you sort of gave your life back to God or whatever, or the universe or spirit or whatever you want to call it? Do you have examples of the things that were tangibly changing for you, or was it more of a knowing that you were making better decisions because your brain had shifted, like you were now looking in a different direction, so you were making different decisions at that point?
Well, the first tangible one would have been exactly what I just explained, because before that I was trying so hard to manage and control, and I figure out what the best way to do things, or like to protect a system or whatever. And as soon as I let it go and surrendered, and I was relieved of the false responsibility of trying to manage everything and everybody, then things unfolded like in a way that I wouldn't have been able to predict. And that's when I remembered, maybe it is remembering, because I think I've gotten so far away from my integrity and my higher power over the last 20 years, like since I was a kid, that maybe it is a remembering. But I remembered, or I became aware that I'm not privy to all the information.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of my life, I think that I know what's coming. I know what this person's going to do. I know what's happening. I know everything that's unfolding, and I've got to make sure that it happens the right way. And I don't have all the information, so I can't make these grand, big decisions where I'm like resisting things, where I'm trying to control something.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came out of rehab, I had no kind of expectations of work, what I was going to do, how my life was going to unfold. The only thing I knew was between rehab and my house, I was going to go to an AA meeting. That was it. And that's what I did. And then the next day, or I went to bed, and then the next day I went to an AA meeting, and I had these little steps, like the next right thing for me to do. And the way that my life unfolded after that, like with the job that I ended up like going into right after that, the position I went into ended up being amazing for my new sobriety, because I was able to work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It just then, when instead of stressing about what I was going to do as soon as I got out of rehab, I had learned in rehab to let things unfold.
Mm-hmm. Can you, Shannon, speak to how you grew up and what sort of family you came from? Like how your parents were, what your dynamic was with them, sort of a little bit of a backstory of like what you came from.
Yeah. And so this is a hard one for me. Not because I've been talking about my family dynamic since I was a teenager, and unashamed, like no holds barred, but my dad has just passed in March. So it feels different. I don't know. I think it's probably because I think he's like here, like sitting here, like hanging out with me. So, so my parents, it was an alcoholic household that I grew up in. And the best way to describe it was 95% of the time, let's say 90, I'm probably tacking on it 5% because I think Dad's sitting next to me, but let's say like 90% of the time I was in a normal household. Like my parents were normal. I had rules. I had like pretty stable and loving, and my dad and mom told me since I was young that I could do and be whatever I wanted to. And they built me up and gave me a voice and all this stuff that they probably regretted later, but they really, really loved me and took care of me. But it was the 10% of the time that was a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why it's so hard, because I don't want to, because my dad's passed away, so it's hard for me. But
well, I know how you feel, because I know how you feel in this instance, because it feels like rather than communicating what the problem was, you feel like you're tattletaling on them, and they
in
don't
a
have the
weird
voice.
way.
Yeah, and you feel like, but you feel like you have to defend your parents till the bitter end, and you're like, you know what the truth is. It's like you have this truth, and you're like, fuck, he's here somewhere.
He's totally yeah, so it was chaotic, and it was a war zone. It's the best way to describe it.
What did your mom and dad do for a living?
My dad was a pipe fitter by trade. So he, like, even when I talk, like, look at my face. I'm like so proud right now after I just said it was a fucking war zone. Like, it's so crazy, but I'm so proud of my dad. So my dad was a pipe fitter by trade, and he ended up in the management end of it. But he did that for like 40, 50 years. But he tried lots to get out of it. So he'd do different things. But and my mom was a waitress, like in the service industry, right up until she retired. That's what they did.
Was it when you say it was a war zone, was it a war zone because your parents didn't get along, or your parents were sort of giving into their own vices, and then things would just spiral out of control at your house?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like alcohol is alcohol for people that can't drink it without it destroying their lives is a dark, crazy poison. Like, I know that sounds super dramatic, but some people can drink and never black out or never do anything that they regret. And then there's people like myself who drink, and I have the ability to turn into a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. So as a kid and an only child, I grew up dealing with that kind of on my own, right? Like, I didn't have a bunch of siblings that I could.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, to soundboard off of it's so strange, because like I completely hear what you're saying, and I didn't grow up at all like that. Like I completely empathize with what you're saying. But my parents were the total opposite. They were predominantly under control, just like aloof and dealing with their problems internally and not focusing on children, right? So like my parents weren't always like that. When they were in their struggles, that's what was happening, right? Was they were dealing with themselves exclusively and not with children. And so myself and my two sisters were just sort of swimming along, and I have the same memories that you do of growing up. Just mine's not a war zone. Mine was like a library that had landmines on the floor. Like you had to be quiet, but it was like, fuck, I hope I don't step in the wrong place. Something might detonate here.
Yeah, and it's the same, like, I think, at least from what I've kind of experienced with people, it's the same kind of shaky foundation, whether even if like, I've known people that they're never heard their parents yell, and I'm like, what? Never seen their parents cry, never seen them fight, and they're just as messed up as I am, and in different ways, right? Like, if it wasn't, like, or not even in different ways, in the same ways, they were in rehab with me, like, and they had never seen that kind of war zone. So I think it creates a shaky foundation, and either way. And like, the one thing, there's a lot of factors that were like gave me resilience within my family, and it had a lot to do with them too, like the way that they brought me up, kind of the way they brought me up in that 90% of the time allowed me to not hide what was happening, not feel ashamed. I spoke about it. So that 90% of the time they brought me up in a way that I was able to express myself, because my family was a very expressive family. So I didn't have to stuff anything down.
How did they do with that when you started expressing what they didn't express? But I want to just add to that, because like my own experience when I hit sobriety and I started like standing at my own pulpit in front of my parents, they were like, it rattled them to their core, because I was raised the same way, right? Like, you have a voice, you better use it. And when I turned that megaphone towards my family, they were like, that's a little bit loud. I think you could dial it down a little bit here.
I was expecting, so when I say that, like, I was using my voice way before I got sober, even at the family dynamics. So that wasn't a surprise. But what I was, and it was always what my dad, in this weird juxtaposition, like, encouraged in me too. Like, there was it was never dampened from my dad. Whatever my voice was, or like what I needed to say, was not right, because he had told me to always stand up for what's not right. And so that included that shit. So I did think when I went into rehab that I thought when I came out, I thought it would be really hard to like break the enmeshment of us, because we were super enmeshed, and fucked up, right? Like, loved each other fiercely, but also I was 35 and they were way too involved in my life. And like, like, it was an enmeshed relationship. But for whatever reason, like, when I came out of rehab, the boundaries that I had like only 2 hours at my parents' house, or like I wanted them to bring my car to rehab instead of them coming to pick me up, because I wanted to drive myself out of there. And so I was worried about those kind of boundaries, creating that, what the hell is going on? Because it happens a lot in kind of dysfunctional units. And I don't know, my parents, I don't know where they got it from. I thought, like, did they go to rehab while I was away, or did they go to Al-Anon, or like what? Like, I had no idea what they had done, but they were so incredibly healthy and understanding, and not defensive, or they didn't own any of, like, they didn't take it personally, the things that I was exploring and going through. And I don't know where that came from, but I'm incredibly grateful for it, because my parents, at every cake that I had, what, like.
Did when you found, like, when you came to God in rehab, was it an awkward moment for you, because you'd gone to church? Not that you'd gone to church your whole life, right? I understand how growing up Catholic works. Like, I was in the pews too, hungover and not paying attention to anything that was happening. And for whatever reason, your parents were like, this is how we do this. Did you find it strange that you found, like, when you did find that, did you have like an aha moment, or did you have a moment that was like, what the fuck was happening before? Like, what was I doing before?
Like, with God? Like,
Yeah.
where, like, oh, okay.
Like sorry, I should have explained that better. Like, with, like, where you said you grew up Catholic, you had a belief in God.
Yes.
But do you find it strange that you had a belief in something that, I'll bet what you believed in was not the feeling you had. And I'll bet the thing that you believed in didn't alter your life the way it has now. So when you found it and you could reconcile it, did you have a moment that you were like, what? Like, how is it this? And like, what were my parents looking for? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So totally know what you mean. So what comes to mind is, prior to, like, my dad wasn't religious. My mom grew up in Ireland, Irish Catholic. And she brought me to church, like, up until I don't know what we do. We put the little wedding dress on and then we get married to God or something, like when we're young. And then it's like a confirmation or a communion. Is it a communion?
I think so. I'm
You
not.
got to be better than that.
I'm not blankly staring at you like trying to be condescending. I'm blankly staring, thinking like, Jesus Christ, they actually do this stuff. And like,
Yeah, I
as
was
soon as you
gonna bring
started
a picture.
explaining it, I was like, and it might be first, like the first communion is the bread. You're eating the
But you
body
wear
of.
little white gloves and a little white wedding dress. Like I have a picture, but
Oh wow, it sounds like a music video.
so so anyways, I went to that, and then my mom didn't make me go to my next one, which is when you're 16. Okay. So I don't know what that one is. My mom's gonna kill me when she watches or
I know
listens to
that I
this.
know the 16-year-old one is confirmation in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And that one makes me laugh my ass off because I've been confirmed in the Catholic Church, and I laugh every single time that they send children to confirm their faith in an institution. Like when those kids become adults, it's over. But sorry, carry on.
Yes. So the way my relationship with God early in my life was, I knew that God was a thing. I didn't believe that if a God was all loving or whatever, compassionate or whatever, then I didn't believe how awful he sounded in the teachings or whatever. So I went to a Christian summer camp when I was young, and learned about God and all that stuff. And I remember being like, I don't know, this doesn't sound like, you can't be all loving and all compassionate and then like a vengeful, egotistical. Like if you were just to make people just to worship you, like that seems really egotistical. Like it just didn't connect with me even as like an 8-year-old. And so I remember deciding that I believe in God and he's a nice God, but I wasn't ready at 8. I remember I was 7, 8 in this camp. I wasn't ready to stop swearing. So I made a deal with God, and I was like, because I knew he was real. I didn't think he was what they were saying he was, but I knew he was real. And I said, I will come back to you as soon as I get the swearing out of my system, because you couldn't swear and believe in God. Like there was no, you were either like pure or like, you were like, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember being like, I got you. Like, I believe in you. I will come back. I just need to get the swearing out of my system. And then I never went back till I was like 35 and I'm still swearing, but so I remember making that deal. And so that was God was negotiating how I could be in his life and him in my life. And the God that I felt in that moment in rehab was there was no negotiating. There was just being.
Yep.
And there was all this time that I had turned my back on God, but like God is omnipresent. Like he had never, I don't even know if he's a he, I have no idea, but like whatevs is just there no matter if I'm facing away or facing or like numbing or drinking or whatever I was doing to like block out all the good, because I wanted to block out all the bad. I realized in that moment that God is just there. And I connected with, I forgot about this actually. So I started feeling God in my stomach. So, and I don't know how to explain it without sounding weird, but after that moment of feeling God, like actually feeling it, I got in touch with my integrity. So whenever I was out of line with my integrity, and it could be anything, like the smallest thing, I would feel this shift in my stomach. It was almost like there was a straight line and then it would just slightly shift out. just nudging me that something isn't, like, my intentions here aren't true or whatever it was. And I started feeling that connection in my stomach every time I went to, like, go try to control a situation or tell myself that this is why I'm doing something, but it actually wasn't. And I was able to connect with this, like, sense of integrity that was bigger and stronger and more powerful than any sense of integrity I had prior to that. And, like, I had prided myself on being, like, a truth teller, speaking the truth, standing up for what was right. But I only did that when it was really safe or convenient, or, like, I was feeling brave or whatever. But, like, this new connection with God allowed me to connect with my integrity. And sometimes that meant shutting up. Where before it was the only way I was being integral to my truth was yapping. So that was a felt sense of God that I'd never had before, and totally different than the God that I had made a deal with, or had to make a deal with.
I just want to say, Shannon, with what you said there, because I have the same. It's my stomach, the pit of my stomach and the pit of my wife's stomach are, like, we're very fortunate because they are laser focused. And we have a joke now that's like, if we're doing anything, how do you feel about it? Good. How do you feel about it? Good. But if either one of us are off, we don't even talk about it. So no, we're not doing that. Like, whatever it is, like, it'll be a huge decision. And one of us will be like, I don't like it. And we'll just cut it. But when you said, like, I think people need to be careful when they say things like where you said it was hard to recognize your integrity when, you were, like, you wanted to talk. And I obviously I was the same way. I still am the same way. But I think you come to those realizations with age. Like, as you gain wisdom, you start to speak less. Like, you've already expressed every goddamn thing you're going to express. You know what I mean? And honest to God, I believe this. Like, I think that a lot of our realizations we have as we get older is that something in us fundamentally understands that we've tried to talk our way through everything, and that didn't work. Yeah. And you're at a point now that's like, I've said that before, and it didn't necessarily work out for me. So just tell me what else you got, and I'll sit here and we'll see where we end up now, right? And it's such. I really feel like it's such an integral part of really learning, of really turning into that next person, that next phase of who you are. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And for me, that next phase of who I am is, like, that ebb and flow that I was saying. Like, this hasn't been a straight line for me. Like, I didn't, like, feel God and then all of a sudden I'm, like, super chill and zen and noticing, like, bumblebee wings and shit. Like, I have, like, gone through some ups and downs since I connected with God in my adulthood. And so I went through stages of where I could just sit and be and listen. And then I went through stages where I couldn't. And then I was grasping again. Like, I literally just came out of, or I don't even know if I'm coming out of one, but where I didn't just listen, or I didn't try to hear God or listen to my stomach or anything like that. So that I noticed that when I'm not connected and I'm not listening and I'm trying to run still in some ways, they say that it's like in AA is kind of like is just a huge part of my life. And they say something about, like, keeping you from the sunlight of the spirit. And just because I don't drink or do drugs anymore, there's a lot of things that can still keep me from the sunlight of the spirit. So it could be shopping or food or Facebook or whatever. And when I'm in those things or trying to prove a point or getting super self-righteous about shit, because when I get self-righteous, it's juicy. I love it. I love the feeling. I think I'm right. I'm not that person that can sit and listen or not talk or hear. I'm still like grasping. So it hasn't been a straight line. Like, it's like, I remember when you first asked me to go on this podcast, I was like, I don't know if this was the right time, because you should have caught me like 3 years ago when I just came out of rehab. Like, ooh, that would have been a good time, you know? And then I was like, well, this is the relationship with God that I know. And people I know, it's like up and down. Like, it's not, it's an ebb and flow. And sometimes I'm really connected and sometimes I'm not, but I can feel the difference. Like, I feel connected right now.
Do you feel connected right now because of things that you're doing, if you really think about it, or do you just feel circumstantially connected right now?
So circumstantially, probably, but I've been letting kind of the magic of things unfolding happen in the last little bit. So right now in this moment, I don't think I can say it's not circumstantial, because we're literally on a podcast talking about God. So, but I have been connecting back with God in a way, and like, even like listening to your podcast with Ron, who I love dearly, just the connection of him and my dad, and like all of these magical things that are just kind of unfolding, that when I let it be, it's because of the things I'm doing, and it's because of the things that I'm letting unfold, that I feel connected to God.
My shaman Wade, like, to say he fundamentally changed my life is a ridiculous understatement. But the way he changed my life was not the way that usually when someone says like, this guy changed my life, it's usually like, if you meet that guy, you get your doors blown off by him. Like, that's what you think, you know what I mean? Like, there's fireworks coming out of his head and he's like tap dancing into the room and stuff. And like, I believe I sent this message to you where like, I was talking to Wade, privately on the phone. Like, I use him more as the therapist now, because like I found that I got to this point in psychology that I needed less psychological structure. I needed more wisdom and somebody with some experience to tell me to shut the fuck up, or do this, Matt. Like, try this, Matt. And so I do a lot. I do a lot with Wade. Like, I do a lot of his courses. And with COVID, all of his courses were spent online. And so, you know, I would, during his classes, people would ask questions, and you can imagine the questions that pop up. I mean, you're talking about communing with another side. You're talking about communing with spirits. I mean, no question is a bad question. But my offensive, egomaniacal brain would sit there and hear these questions, and I'd be like, you're joking. Like, why are you asking this question? And it would infuriate me. People asking ridiculous questions that I decided were ridiculous. And I could not let it go. I couldn't do it. And I never said anything in that moment, but like, it was internally just like eating me up. I was like, how are you asking these questions? And anyway, the next time I spoke to Wade privately, I said like, how are you reconciling this? Like, you're infinitely more intelligent than I am. Like, he's the smartest person I've ever met. Like, aside from like spirituality, he's just unbelievably intelligent. And he goes, just like in one line, he's like, you know, Matt, you really got to give people space, because, you know, I often say to myself, like, if I grew up in that person's circumstance, I would have asked the exact same questions. And the moment he said that, I was like, motherfucker, of course you would. You know what I mean? It was this profound shift that's turned me like 45 degrees to the way I was living. And I was like, I walk this way now. And it's the goofiest thing, because I don't have those instances anymore where someone asks a stupid question and I decide that I'm better than they are and I wouldn't ask that question. All I can hear is him being like, you'd ask the same thing if you grew up that way.
Yeah.
Like, of course I would have. And I look at the news now, I think that like and obviously I needed to be in the right place, because if that guy said that to me 10 years ago, I'd have said, fuck off, Wade. Like, You don't know anything about me. Like, beat
Yeah.
it. But like in that moment, for that time, like, you know what I mean? You're given this ridiculous one-liner that was just like completely changed my thought process. You know, do you know what I mean? And I can't recall where I was going with that, but it was something important to me. But
Well,
anyway.
it reminded me of like that reminds me so much of that self-righteousness that I can get into, right? And that's exactly what you just
Yes.
described, right? Like I would have rage bubbles. Like they would like feel like this bubble was coming up, and like I would be so not only like outraged, like how could somebody be asking these questions, or like is even in rehab, like if people were talking while somebody else was sharing, like my little justice warrior that would come up and like it would be almost, I would be unable to like stifle it down. And I was judging so much on how much better how could somebody do this? And it would just feel so juicy. And so I was high. I got high when I was in that self-righteous, juicy, how could you think that way? How could you do that? And I had to learn, like, it was so hard, Matt, because I believe there's a right and there's a wrong. Okay.
Completely.
It is not okay to be like whispering while somebody is sharing a really valid or really vulnerable story of their life. Like, it's not okay. And I felt like I was responsible to let everybody know that it wasn't okay. And I would feel these bubbles come up, and it got so bad because in the like this big hall, there was a bathroom that had one of those like yank toilet paper or what is it? Hand towel?
Yeah. It's like
So we're in this big thing, we're sitting around, people are sharing their life story from like the time they were 3 to like now. And these people would go into the bathroom and yank like 5 times in the middle of people sharing. So they would like hard yank and it would echo. And I was so enraged. Like I couldn't handle it. So I went out to the smoke pit after and I announced to everybody that you get 3 yanks. That is it. And then it was such a thing that like they got me the number of the engineer and I could call them if I really had a problem with who made it. So, but that feeling, I know it's so not like it's so insignificant, but like I felt like I couldn't even breathe. I was so angry. Not only that, I couldn't listen to the person sharing anymore.
But I understand what you're saying, Shannon, because I suppose I was past that point in my life where I was gonna nail someone to the wall over it, but I was like brooding over the questions. Imagine the ego of a person. You're sitting with your shaman. You're in a group of people who are holy Jesus. If there's a group of like-minded people, I'd say that's it. If you're communing online to talk to a shaman, and I'm deciding what the appropriate questions are. Do you know what I mean?
It's so good. And I had a God put this moment in front of me, and I have to remember it to this day. And I think you'll like it. So I'm in rehab, and they have speakers come for the women or whatever once every week. And so they bring these speakers in to talk about sobriety on the outside. And these 2 people come, these 2 ladies, and the first lady, amazing, super profound. Oh, just like exactly what should happen when somebody comes in and speaks to a bunch of vulnerable people trying to stay sober. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. And then the second lady talks and I am like, are you fucking kidding me? And then the whole time I'm like, who let her in? Who screens these people? These other people that are trying to stay sober are going to walk out. Like, I'm worried about these people because this is not what we need to be hearing. Full time, juicy self-righteousness. Just as I get to leave and I'm just like, I don't know who works here and who allowed this. Maybe I should go talk to somebody. And just as I was about to leave, this girl got up from the floor, went over to that one lady and started crying and said, thank you so much. I needed to hear exactly what you said. And in that moment, I was like, you asshole, Shannon. Who are you to think that a message, you're only going to hear a message, and to me, it's from my higher power comes through people with their messages, and it touches people at the right moment, right? Just like the shaman saying that one thing to you. Who am I to say what somebody else needs to hear? And I really believed that I knew. Like, I believed that, like, there was no way that that lady who had talked was going to be moving or profound. She's, you know, she said like too many times, just like I'm doing. Like, there was a whole bunch of reasons why I thought it wasn't a profound story of sobriety. And then to see another human have one of those enlightening moments in a time where I was in my head so much bitching about whoever let this person through. That's why I don't get to control everything.
Completely. It was, I'm trying to think if it was, I can't remember the quote. It was some like packaged spiritual leader. It was like Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer. And I can't remember how they said it. There was Wayne Dyer, and he said that, you know, if you look for instances to be offended in life, you're never going to be let down. And it didn't mean anything to me until like a month ago. Like, I thought I understood it when I heard it. I was like, yeah, these people that are getting mad, how dare they? You know, and I'm walking around just like a bad dog, like, you can't ask those questions. These are my questions. Like, you know, it's such a strange way to think, but it's so disjointed from the universe. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, what an ego move that is. Like, any time you've decided that what is best for them is through you. I mean, like, guys like Hitler did a pretty good job thinking like that, I suppose. But you know what I mean? Like, there's no other way to, for me anyway, to communicate that other than you're so disjointed from what, like, God, spirit, universe, whatever it is wants, that you're deciding how to dole out, you know, these amazing experiences, right? And that's how I feel about self-righteousness. Like, I feel like if you're me anyway, I feel like if I'm engaging in self-righteousness, I'm taking potential righteous moments that I would see elsewhere, and I'm just deciding to dole them out, right? And I mean, the fuck do I know? You know, all I've done is screw my life up to this point with a couple of good moments, but I'm just like banging off the sides, you know? And it's so funny how, like, you know, you make it so far in life with those traits, and, you know, you don't know any other way to communicate. You know, I laugh at you when you say, like, you only get 3 clicks. Man, you're good for you for
I was being nice.
Good for you for making it to the smoke pit. I'd have gone into the bathroom and been like, you get 1. Like, you're lucky you're not drying your hands with toilet paper. You get 1 click, dummy. Like, that's it. It's,
and that is when I am not, like, literally not connected in any way. That's like the sunlight of the spirit is so blocked. Like, there's nothing there's nothing I'll hear. There's not, like, there's times in, like, AA meetings I have to pray over and over again to have an open mind and an open heart to hear what I need to hear, because sometimes I go in there and I am, like, fucking irritated from the get-go. Like, I'm irritated. Nothing's going to get through to me. Everybody's annoying me. Their shares are stupid. Like, it happens all the time because I'm me. And I pray for an open heart and an open mind. And when I actually do that, then I allow something to come in, you know, not what I think should come in, or what, or even, like, when I share, like, I didn't want to think too much about what I was going to say on this, because when I think too much about what I think would be profound and what I should say when we talk about God, that same self-righteousness comes in, and, like, I know better. So in those moments, I try to pray for an open heart and an open mind. I should actually start again by, like, praying for, like, the awareness to ask for that, because I've gone kind of so far past that I'm not even asking for an open heart and an open mind in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I need to like take it a step back and pray for like the willingness to have an open heart and an open mind, because I'm noticing that in situations I'm kind of just in the judginess and I'm not even giving myself, or I'm not even open to not being, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny you say that, because I find it's very easy. It's very easy, especially if you have a mind, if you have a seeking mind, you constantly seek further. So like your prayer, your meditation, your intention, whatever it is, you feel like it needs to change.
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, it's like it's not enough. And my conversation I had with Reverend Ron, all I could think of as he was talking was like, and I've always known him to be a man who facilitated love and understanding. That was it. It was love and understanding.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's really nothing else. That's it. Like you have
That's
to love people, and you have to like show some understanding towards them. And you know, it's funny the layers of humanity, right? Because you think you know, or you think you have it figured out, or you think this, you think that. Because I mean, Jesus, I only went through this instance with Wade telling me this a couple months ago.
Yeah.
You know, I would have said that for the last bunch of years. No, I understand what people say when they say love and understanding, but you know, I'm still spracking off in my mind, sitting with a bunch of people that are trying to learn about spirituality, and I'm like, oh, fucking keep up, keep up. You know what I mean? And I'm, you know, what I'm super thankful for now, at least, is like I actually see myself doing it now, and like I've got these two things in my brain, and the decent Matt looks at the piece of shit, and he's like, oh,
Yes.
look at him, he's running amok again. Bring him back here. Bring that idiot back.
Yes.
I've come a long ways, but I find myself more embarrassed about who I am now internally. Like I don't ever get the opportunity to express it. It's like, I go shopping with my kids, and I'm like, I get precious about the goofiest things, right? Like anything. And I think my brain's obsessive compulsive too. Like, but like I go up to get milk. Somebody beats me to the milk I was looking at. I'm like,
That's mine.
I was looking at that, you know, and I won't say it. I won't say it, thank God. But like in that moment when I have that thought, I become so embarrassed about who I am, because I'm like, oh, you're so fucking like, shut up, stupid, shut up. And it's
Like by default.
Yep.
Like who I go to just by default when I'm not like consciously trying to be open to something greater than this one milk that I thought was mine and somebody's eyeballing it. Like it's just like it's amazing. It's amazing what an asshole I can be. And like also, but this is the thing I'm really embracing, and I think that being able to like experience whatever's the way that I have is that it can be both. There's so many things that it can be both. So I'm an asshole, but I'm also incredibly loving and compassionate. And sometimes my assholeness comes out and sometimes it doesn't. And like, same with like, I can doubt God because I've been doubting my faith since I went through a pretty dark place about a month ago, just with passing of my dad. Like I had thought that I could feel him, and like I felt connected with God right after he passed. And then I went through a place where I was like, there's nothing. I've never been an atheist in my entire life. And I was an atheist for like a day. Like I thought there was nothing, and it was just blackness, and there was nothing, and it was awful. But what I embrace is I can doubt God, because I do. It happens. I'm human. My brain is an asshole, and it'll try to think of all the reasons why it's not. There's nothing else. But I can doubt God, and I can believe in God at the same time. And I know that sounds like.
It sounds like a human living a human experience, Shannon. And I think but I think that's the point, is and again, Wade casting light on ways to live appropriately for me. Like he says that constantly because I whine to him about like these things that are going wrong. And I spoke to him this morning, and he spoke about not allowing yourself to be a victim and to just rolling through things that are happening. And it's like, it's so, it rings so true to me now. I understood it before, but those things ring true to me now. When, you know what I mean? I'm starting to cut myself slack in those instances. I'm starting to, like, we're still humans living in a human experience. And, you know, I speak to him about this all the time as well. There's a thing that just irritates me to no end. And it doesn't make me mad, but it irritates me for spiritual, holistic, naturopath people. There's a weird belief structure to what they have that, like, you can't live well, you can't start a business, you can't make these things work. And that's as dogmatic and ridiculous as like what you just said. Like, you're allowed to believe in God and still be like, what the fuck, where are you now? Like,
Yes.
come here. Like, that's a human experience. Like, you're starving yourself of a human experience if you're holding yourself to a standard that isn't fucking real. Like, these aren't real standards, you know? Like, we decide, you know, you decide you're spiritual, so you should be making money. You decide you should be more connected to God, so you can't have these fallible moments of wondering where God is. Like, of course you're supposed to question it. You live here. You don't have a connect line in the third dimension to speak to those things. Like, if you want to, there's like systems to participate with them, but it's not easy. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think we give each other or give ourselves the opportunity to exist in those moments, right? Because like you said, like when you start to doubt, you're like, well, I doubt it. It's over now. Like,
Yeah.
no point for what I did before. It's all over. I'm an atheist.
It was a dark day. Other than that, my faith has been very ebb and flow. Like, I have allowed myself, well, actually, I've been taught. It's not like I allowed myself. I was taught by some really spiritual people in my life that it's okay to like be mad at God or like not believe in God, or say, like, I was trying to pray and it felt fake. And I was just like, my prayer, I was just like, this feels fake and I don't know what to say. Or like, if I was trying to, like, part of the 12 steps is, I don't even know if I'm allowed to even talk about this. Actually, I'm like breaking all the traditions.
Are you really?
One tradition.
But
I don't believe in it because I like to recover out loud, but I think there's like a tradition that you're not allowed to like press or whatever, but I think people break it now. Eminem's in AA, so he broke it. So
yeah, he did. Carry on.
So I can't remember what I was talking about. Progress, not perfection. We aren't saints. It's all that kind of. That's like where I've kind of really developed my spirituality in my adulthood. Mm-hmm. And one of the suggestions is to like pray in the morning. And so when I was trying to do that, it felt like really weird and uncomfortable. And I felt like I was like faking it. So then I would just like say, hey, and that's all I would do. And then it would kind of snowball into like more of a conversation. And then I got out of the need to have it like checked off my checklist. Like I had it like on my to-do list, and then I'd be like, done. And then I was like, I don't think this is how it's supposed to feel. I think it's supposed to be more intuitive. So the conversation with God became more of like a quiet listening and acknowledging and a thanking. But it still feels weird sometimes, and sometimes it feels fake, and sometimes it feels like I'm trying to be spiritual and I'm not, and sometimes it feels like I'm an imposter. But I've known peace and comfort and love, a love that I've never felt before over the last 3.5 years. So I know it's real. even in those times that it really feels fake. And I'm just like, hey, buddy, how's it going? And that's how I talk to God.
Do you go to church, Shannon, or do you have a meditation practice, or do you do anything? Do you do anything to commune or to sort of sharpen the edge constantly, or do you sort of let it happen as it happens for you just in your life day to day?
So I don't go to church. Right now, I don't have a practice that I do. Most of where I feel connected the most to God is in AA meetings. Like it's kind of where it's like, I say this and it sounds ridiculous, but like if I'm really having a hard time connecting with God on my own, if I go around people, it's like mainlining God, which sounds awful, but it's like, it's a way.
But it is though.
It is, right?
But it is like it is.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally, but there's a reason that drum circles happen with a bunch
Right.
of people. There's a reason that practices happen with a bunch of people. Like you are mainlining God.
Yeah.
When you realize you're mainlining God, you probably should stop doing it. But yes, you are mainlining God completely. You're mainlining a connection to have that experience.
Yeah. And then so like I used to go to meetings more than I have been lately. So I've kind of, my meetings have gone down. My connection, talking about God and my higher power has gone down too. So that's why when I said like this podcast coming up kind of came at one of those interesting points, because I don't feel like I've been engaged in like a daily practice in any way. And so this is just kind of part of like exploring that connection with the God of my understanding more, you know?
For sure. Do you feel like you're an alcoholic anymore, Shannon?
Yes.
You do? Like, are you concerned with diving back into the deep end if something goes really wrong?
So, what helps me, so I'm sober because I have a higher power, I have a sponsor, and I go to meetings. That's not how a lot of people get sober. There's some people get sober. You got sober differently than me. I believe at my core, like default, I'm irritable, restless, and discontent. And prior to finding sobriety and like connecting with a higher power, I would deal with that by drinking, drugging, traveling, like whatever it was, shopping, other people's problems. I think was my first drug of choice, was other people's problems, food, anything. So to me, like I really identify with like an addictions disorder. Alcohol happened, or not, maybe not even a disorder, but like alcohol happened to be my choice and destroyer. But I will, like, for me, the way that I am sober, and it's not everybody, is like complete abstinence from alcohol and drugs. And each day I remind myself I'm an alcoholic, and it could be anything that would take me out. It doesn't have to be alcohol. Like it could be anything.
That's interesting. Because I'm at the point now where it's just sort of a laugh. Like I can't believe I used to drink as much as I did.
Yeah.
And I miss alcohol. I don't miss to get, I don't miss to get drunk. I don't miss any of those things. But like, if I smell like a Shiraz, like if I'm walking by red wine and I smell it, or if I smell port in particular, I'm like, hey, there's a bad dog in me still, right? I'm like,
totally.
But then I come back to it. It's not even an option. Do you know? Like
that's what it is. That's exactly what it is, Matt. Sorry for cutting you out.
No,
cutting you off. Is that it is no longer an option for me? Like it's just not an option. But do I have grief over it sometimes that comes up, and like say red wine, like if I think I have these delusions of that I had a really fancy drinking moments. They were never fancy, but I have this delusion of like, you know, me drinking red wine and like on a plane or in a fancy hotel, when in reality it was just like red wine all like staining my neck and mascara and all that stuff. So I have the moments of like that grief of like, oh, there were these like parts of that of my life when I was drinking that I miss. And I just know, like, to my core, Matthew, I have never, and I will never be able to drink normally. Like, I didn't start my drinking career drinking like a normal human being, and I will never be able to drink. So to me, that's why I am an alcoholic.
Completely. I mean,
I'm just a sober one.
Yeah. Well, I see, but that's like, personally, I'm not a person that gets like, I don't get caught in the weeds with the lingo, but like when, you know, if a person says like, I'm still an alcoholic, I'm like, yeah, you probably are. Personally though, I'm like, I feel the same way that you did, right? Like I know I'll never drink again. Like it's not I'm not one of those people, fortunately, that has to say like, maybe one day, but not today. It's just like, no, there's no cause. Like, I don't know what would do that for me. But same thing as you, right? You know, like you start, I was mixing dry gin martinis at 13 years old. Like, I have a 13-year-old kid, right? He doesn't know what it's like to mix dry gin martinis to go to sleep at night. Do you know what I mean? Like, what sort of mutant human being, you know, but that's like, I grew up coping by getting drunk. Like, there's no opportunity for me to have fun with those things. And so, you know, when I go to restaurants or if I go to a nice place and there's a nice bottle of wine on the table, I envy those people. And not because they're drinking it. I envy them because they're not mutants. Or maybe they are. Maybe they are. But in my mind, I have this fanciful thought that, like, you know, they're going to have one drink and it's going to be over. My father-in-law is like that. It'll be a hot day. He'll crack a beer and he'll have a couple of sips and be like, I don't even think I'm going to finish it. And I'm like, finish it out of principle. Like, finish what you've started. And then that anger boils up in me, right? Like,
yes. And and that's the thing that sometimes I've gone through, like, am I an alcoholic? Am I not an alcoholic? When I was getting sober, right? Like, I was trying to, you know, I had reasons of like, well, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm just like being dramatic, like my mom said or whatever. And then I realized, like, I really came to realize there are humans that are my age that have never blacked out in their life. Like, they've never woke up and not remembered how they got to the place that they are now awakening in.
Who are they? Because I don't know them.
There are normal people that don't react that way to alcohol. So there's also people that can, like, have a chip and then close up the bag, Matt. Like, I don't know these humans, but
no, there's not. I don't believe in them either.
It is so true. And so when I was in rehab, I was like, okay, so I was thinking of like how I drank and the things that would happen when I drank and the places I would go just emotionally and in my mind. And then I know that there's these people that can have, one of my friends at work, he's like, I think I'm going to have a beer with my dinner. And I'm like, I was the type of alcoholic that, like, if there was 2 beer in the fridge, I wouldn't even fucking bother. Like, if there was no way for me, if I couldn't get to the store, like if there was like lava outside and there was only 2 beer in that fridge, I wouldn't even start. Wouldn't even awaken the beast. That's why I didn't drink for so many years when I was working up north, because I just knew I couldn't. So anyways, yes, I'm an alcoholic.
Well, it's an interesting answer with everyone that, and I mean, I have a dog in this fight. So if I can smell that you are sober, or if I can smell that you've gone to rehab, I am just like, I'm
Yes.
asking you every question I can think of, and I don't leave anybody alone if they're sober. I'm like, so how'd, it's like a brothers in arms, right? Or a brother and
Totally.
sister in arms. You're like, so you know what it's like, right? And then it's, it's stranger to me, yeah, when somebody sober is standing by or somebody with decency is standing by and they don't understand what you're talking about. Like, I can't drink one bottle of water and be done with it. Is there a case of water in front of me? I'm going to drink all of those waters. How come? Because I want to.
Oh
Like,
my.
if any, but I'm like that with everything. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I was explaining to my kid, we were shopping a couple weeks ago. I said that to my kids, like pushing the shopping cart. And one of them was, we got so many kids. They're pushing a shopping cart and I'm pushing a shopping cart. And I had to push my shopping cart faster than my daughter. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you will never push a shopping cart like I will. Ever.
Ever.
Ever. It's who I am, and all I do is try and, I try and push that thing down, but I should say I try and shave parts of it off and then I push it down for a little bit and I'm like, okay, just, behave yourself,
I know.
behave yourself.
And that's kind of the, what came to mind was, you might not remember this, but we were at one of the jobs we were together. It was before I got sober. You were already sober and you came to my desk like the animal that you are. And you were like messing my stuff up or whatever, but you grabbed my gum and you took one piece of gum and then you dumped the entire thing in your mouth and like started chewing really hard because you can just have one piece of gum. I can't. So then I remember laughing and being like, yeah, because I knew I was an alcoholic then. I just wasn't sober yet. We both knew I was. And now every time I have gum, which is like 5 pieces at once, I remember you saying that and being like, I'm reminded I'm an alcoholic every time I try to have gum, like one piece of gum. And
I'm sorry I did that with your gum, but I'm not doing those things as a joke. Like, those aren't party jokes to me. Like,
I know.
Like, it's like all of it or none of it, and
all or none.
And it's amazing speaking about this right now because like I forget about these things in my life because I'm so like it's such a part of me now, and I was about to say I have such control of it. I have such an understanding of it.
Yes.
That when it shows up, I'm like, oh, there you are, you fucker. Oh, and it like runs around the room for a bit, and I'm like, there's no space for you here. You gotta beat it. I gotta feed kids this morning. I can't drink 16 cups of tea, although I'd like to.
Yeah. Or I wasn't going to meetings as much as I was. So I went to this. This is what happens to me if I don't I used to go to like 3 a week. I'm barely making 1 a week right now, which isn't good. But anyways, I go to a meeting and then I'm mainlining God, right? So everybody's shares are profound. I feel connected. I've got like tears of gratitude and bubbles of gratitude. And before I'm even 20 minutes into the meeting, I'm like, when's the next one? So in my mind, I'm already like, I need to go to more meetings. I'm going to go to like 4 a day. I never do. But like in that moment, as something as like pure as human connection and like connecting with God, I can want all of it, like all of it. So it's like when I come out of a meeting like that, and then I tell somebody in recovery that that's how I was feeling, then I feel like I'm like coming back down, and I can actually have the sunlight of the spirit. But when I'm in it, and I'm just like more and more and more, I can be addicted to spiritual experiences too. Like,
Do you, Shannon, do you need spiritual connection out of AA more than community, or vice versa?
Both.
Both? Like both equally, or sometimes this, sometimes that?
Oh, okay, good question. So when I first got sober, for me, it was the community, the sober community that I needed the most. Then I started nurturing my higher power connection. And then it probably flip-flopped. But I think because I was able to nurture a spiritual connection within those meetings, in my I'm still early sobriety, but like my first couple years, when I pulled away from, like when my dad got sick and was going through that stuff, I stopped going to as many meetings and I wasn't reaching out as much. I kind of had like this foundation of a higher power and a community. But for me, like in my sobriety, when I'm feeling kind of, not even my sobriety, in my life, when I'm feeling balanced and centered and I can't find the right word, but just feeling not needing to push upstream, like just acceptance. When I'm in acceptance, that's the word I was looking for. I'm in connection with people in recovery who get why I just ate 20 pieces of gum. And then also I'm feeling my connection with my higher power at the same thing. They're equally as important, but I probably lean on them at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I personally used to have a big one with mine. 100% is spirit, God. Like I don't even need to leave my house anymore. But I'm also very fortunate that I'm married to my best friend, and I really don't want to hang out with anybody else. So I'm fortunate in that aspect. But when it was very difficult for me at the beginning of sobriety because I didn't have community and I didn't have God. So I did that on the back of my stubborn ridiculousness exclusively. Like that was,
oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't have, aside from a community, I didn't have a peer group. Like I existed in a peer group, but I wasn't a part of it. Like it had already passed me, and I didn't have God. I've always known there was something more, sort of in very profound ways my whole life. Like I'm, one of those dorks, but like ayahuasca was the thing that when I left that, I was like, oh, it has a name and everything. And after that was when it sort of became acceptable to me to have a community of people. And when I met this community of people, and it's the community I'm a part of now, right? Like I'm sort of a part of that sort of shamanic, natural, I don't even know how to describe it. It's, people that I suppose people that follow a spiritual path are, I make this joke with Wade all the time that they smell like patchouli and they wear beads. And I feel, you know what I mean? Like I feel so, it's so at home to me, and I feel so out of place there because but I love it, but it's like, I feel like such a sore thumb because I'm like, none of you people are like me. Like I'm just this, I don't know if I'm an old miser or if that because I found sobriety by myself, and I don't wear that. I should say too, I don't wear that as a badge of honor. As a grown fucking adult who has children, if my kids needed to get sober, needed to do whatever, I couldn't imagine not telling them over and over again, you need to find your people. Like you need to find support within what you're doing to carry on with this. And my path at the beginning was exclusively with a psychologist, one psychologist. That was it. It. And it was, when I hear people like you talk about their faith and their connection, their community in AA meetings, it's a funny thing that I've done. I've lied a million times about having gone to AA meetings to avoid that conversation. Like people, like you go to meetings. Oh fuck,
all the time.
I'm like the president of the meeting. I take the meeting. I keep the meeting minutes. But I've never been. I should probably go to one. I've always wanted to. Like they're my people. I don't know why I haven't made it to one yet. But.
It doesn't surprise me that you haven't. Like it does. Like I thought you would have gone to like at least one. But it doesn't surprise me it does not surprise me the path you took. in your sobriety. But knowing you and knowing the band of amazing misfits that I have met in sobriety and in meetings, like I'm surprised that it's never led you there, because your people are there. Like, and the one thing too is like, not every meeting is great. Some of them suck. And that's just what it is, right? So when I first got out of rehab, I just treated it like a smorgasbord. Like, I went to all different types of meetings, and oh my gosh, the wisdom, you know how you're talking about like a different, like instead of like a structural psychology or whatever, like the wisdom that can come through people who are moving through life unbuffered, coming from a place where all they knew was to move through the world intoxicated. And now, like, even like for me, I didn't do any socializing or any kind of I wouldn't be doing this right now without a drink if I wasn't sober. And so being around people that spent decades buffering their life to just get through it, to now they're in a meeting sharing about it. It's something I can't explain. Like, it's a part of, I'm a part of. That's why I always felt comfortable around you, because you were just as messed up as I was in the same way.
But I think for myself anyway, I think that my my path to sobriety mirrored how I grew up.
Yeah.
Shut your fucking mouth and bite down on your mouth guard and march forward. Like, I don't need help. I don't need help. I don't need help. And like, even when I knew I needed help, like, God bless my ex-girlfriend. My ex-girlfriend was the one. She like a lot. I thought I was going to die. I had such bad heart palpitations. I had such bad anxiety. My life was so fucking upside down. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was like, I'm going to die. My heart's going to explode. I'm sure of it. She gets me an appointment with my psychologist. And I believe that was the first time. I've never really thought about it, but now that I'm talking aloud about it, I think that was the first time I personally ever said, yes, you can help me. Send me, I will go to that place. But I do have this thing inside me that's like, it's not even that I don't want help. There are things I don't want help for, and that's one of them in particular, because I found success with my own. It's insane that I became sober off my stubborn mind. Like, cold turkey, done, gone, no more booze.
And you were a disaster before. Like, you weren't,
total.
you weren't like a high bottom. Like, you were material wise, but like, you were
drinking a 40 Estoli every single day. Yeah. To nothing overnight.
Yeah. And the thing I was thinking about, it's like, I totally get that when I said that I'm not surprised at your path of sobriety, and it kind of, when you said that that's something you don't want help with, I kind of makes sense, right? But what surprises me, or kind of like makes me wonder how this community hasn't somehow got, like, you haven't experienced the community, not to get sober, because you're sober, but like, do you know how funny sober alcoholics are? Fucking hilarious. And then the old ones, like, imagine like Ron Green in an AA meeting, but sober and not drinking wine. Like, the wisdom in those rooms are amazing, right? And then there's like a whole community of young sober people that, like, it's just, that's what I'm surprised by. Not that you didn't use AA to get sober, but that you haven't somehow found how
Well,
amazing
well,
they are.
as much as I say that I'm not looking for a community, what really augmented that community for me was really and truly was the spirituality, sort of, you know, shamanism, ayahuasca, psilocybin people. Like
Yeah.
those are people with a story to tell. And,
Yeah.
those are my people as well.
Totally.
But it's it's still strange to me, yeah, because they have a story to tell. They have their life under control. They have a real connection with God that I can speak to them about with their experiences. But I think a lot of them have the same addiction problems, but it's a the way I feel in the spiritual community that I'm in is like, I think because I'm so past being an alcoholic, like I see I'm fortunate enough now, and I work hard enough at it that if there was a hierarchy of problems, alcoholism
Yes.
was not my problem.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? That stupid adage that, like, all an alcoholic is an addict who has never handed a crack pipe. Like, that was
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Like, given that circumstance, I would have done anything. But it's I'm sort of so far past, honest to God, giving a fuck about drinking. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not even real to even talking about it right now, Shannon. I'm like,
Weird.
even when I recall stories, like when I said to you just now, like that I drink a 40 of Stoli, I drink a 40 of raspberry Stoli a day. I'm like, I don't even know what Stoli
What?
tastes like anymore.
Yes.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what vodka tastes like. I don't remember those flavors. And so I know there's a part in my brain that lived that, but I don't remember that guy. Like, he's dead. Like, that
There's
guy's
so much distance in between where you are right now to
completely.
where you were when you needed to. Like, the way that I look at it is I no longer have to partake in something that kills my soul to get through the day. So
Isn't that
before,
unbelievable?
yes. So I used to have to, no matter how short-lived the relief, right? Of like, because at the end, alcohol was like, I got this much, or like small amount of relief for a huge amount of pain. But no matter how short-lived the relief, I was so uncomfortable and so restless and discontent and just in pain, that I didn't matter the outcome. I just needed that relief, no matter how short that was, right? So, and I would pay the consequences over and over and over again, just not to feel that way for a short amount of time. And so, like, the distance, when I hear you talk about that, is like the distance of who you were when you were using things that were killing you, trying you just to survive and like be comfortable with who you were and how you lived. Is so there's such a far distance in between that, right? But the way that I choose to look at it is, I was then and I am now. I could be one bad life event away from, like, part of the reason why I put myself in rehab was I felt like I was one bad life event away of throwing it all up, not even trying to manage it anymore. Like, fucking lose the house. Maybe I'll try heroin and go down on Hastings Street. Like, that's where I was. One bad life event away, like my parent passing or something like that. I couldn't handle it. So, like, the way that I choose to believe is that no matter how distant I get from that person that would drink myself into, like, death almost, like, I'm lucky I'm alive. No matter how much distance I get in there between who I am now and who I was then, is to remember that it would only take one drink. Like, it literally for me would only take one drink, and the shame and the addiction and all that would come up again. And it's like, I hope that even if God, whatever's willing, like 10 years, Matthew, it's amazing. Like, if I ever get to a 10-year sobriety, that I hope that I remember what it was like before. Because I would be worried that I would be like, oh, well, I can't remember how bad it was, And I think that's what meetings do for me too. Cause like people come in after a relapse and it reminds you of how far away I was from any semblance of a healthy life or a connection with God or a connection with anybody really.
Yeah, no, that's like, excuse me. I've never heard it explained that way. And I completely understand what you're saying. Like I'm very fortunate that I don't have that gear. Like it's one of those things, like as you explain it, I'm like, I understand you, but that's not like my experiences. I suppose I'm fortunate on one hand that I just arrogantly bulldoze my way through sobriety.
Totally.
And I arrogantly march my way down Main Street saying like, don't need one. But you're right. Even as you say, like, I don't, oh, goddamn. I hope I have the grace to manage any problem that would come up. I think I do. No, I do. I don't even think I do. I absolutely do. I might not have the methods to deal with those things on my own, but I do know that I have the structure, the contacts, and the wisdom to pull the trigger on those things if anything went wrong immediately.
Yes.
Like there's and that's why I'm so confident in my sobriety. That's why there's no risk of that. I have a Rolodex of people. I have a Rolodex of solutions, and I have wisdom at my disposal from people that I know and from my own experience that's why I'm not concerned.
And that is AA. Like, I know that you're not in AA and it's not, but that's what I found in AA, right? A connection with my higher power, a Rolodex of people I could call in the middle of the night if anything went crazy, and tools. So you found all that stuff just in a different way.
For sure. But why my walk, I think, was so fucking stupid, Shannon, was
yeah, it was dumb, but we're here.
I can say that at 10 years. Like what I just said, I think I've only come to that realization in the last couple of months, or been able to express it appropriately. Like I knew that I could have done that, or I could have soldiered through it, but like it would have sure been a lot easier if I had a method or I had a system to follow throughout it, right? Or steps. Wait, isn't there a program that includes steps? Fucking idiot! Like,
but if you think about it though, like, because as you were speaking of like where you were, because one of the things within like my program is that like this isn't the only way, right? Like this isn't the only way, but the biggest thing is that get a higher a power greater than yourself. And that's like the main thing, like outside of the steps or going to meetings, like in the big book from when it was before, was a higher power and talking to another alcoholic. There wasn't, even before the steps, there weren't steps, and then there weren't meetings. It was just one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, right? So when you were saying the things that you had, a higher power, community, and tools, like, yeah, you're like, thank God you're one of the exceptions, I think, like that can do it on their own with no community or support. And you're just as much as a miracle as somebody that goes to AA and gets sober, because it's not easy. But you found kind of all those like elements that I believe in my sobriety, in just a different path, right? Like it's,
yeah, I see what you're saying there too, Shannon, but the way I see how I did it was, I don't see the miracle. All I see is the damaged little boy was able to leverage the worst of himself, was able to leverage to fix himself. So like that shit had to be like the biting down on the mouth guard and marching forward. Those are all things that had to be fixed along the way. You know what I mean? And my kids helped that like so much. I remember like I heard a line from Louis C.K., that comedian that everyone hates because he, you know, pulled his wiener out and was shaking it at girls when he shouldn't have been. But he had this line about kids that he fucking nailed it. And he said, let your children change you. And honest to God, I try and lean into that so hard. I really do. I try and, when my kids want me to do things or act a certain way or do whatever, like I have such a, I have such a, I have such a guarded sense to myself, right? So it's what got me sober. It's what brought me to this place. But as a dad, like my wife is amazing and understanding, but like I'm so goddamn bad with children that like I have to talk myself into playing with my kids. And not because I don't want to play with my kids. I love my kids. I want to play with them. I don't understand how to.
Yes.
So they'd come up and start playing with me, and I'd be like looking at them, and my wife would be like she'd whisper, like my wife's amazing. She'd be like, play with them, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like he's pointing his finger at me. What do you want me to do with that? And she's like, play with him, Matt. Just play with him. And like, this has only happened in like the last year and a half, Shannon. And I was
wow.
like, the moment it happened for me was in our gym in our home, and I was like, it was the craziest moment. I was like, wow, this is what this is. Like, this is playing with children or being vulnerable to.
Yes.
But at the same time, vulnerability isn't an issue for me with some things. Do you know? So I assumed that if I was vulnerable in, you know what I mean? I've cried with people. I've exposed my heart to people, my soul to people, all these sorts of things. But that was a different kind of vulnerability. That vulnerability with my children, it really changed in an instance. And I suppose like, I think the one thing about myself personally, like with God, with my path is like, I'm very fortunate that when I see my own flaws now, like it doesn't take anything for me. I just lean into them.
Yeah.
Like in real time, I'm like, ooh, you're fucking that up. Like play with these kids, you dummy. Like I don't recognize moments. Like when I was a kid, like you'd hold on to it. If someone said to me, like, you're being an asshole, and I knew I was being an asshole, I'd just keep being an asshole because that's what I felt like doing in that instance. But now if I am being an asshole, or if my wife says like, you're being an asshole, I'm like, oh yeah. Or like, I'll remove myself and be like, yeah, nope, being a total asshole. You are correct. And like, I'm very fortunate that my life is being lived that way now. And I say that with like these vulnerabilities with my children, because like, those are easy things to very quickly dispose of if you're uncomfortable with yourself. Like, yes. No, I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't need this with my kids. I don't need that. I don't need that. We're like, I've been through enough now, and I've been sober long enough. I understand that my comfort has fucking nothing to do with my children's development.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like being a dad is like, I don't give a fuck what they want me to do. You know what I mean? Like, sure, I don't care. And that's across the board. And I think I think that's what I'm saying is I know that if I had a community, I know that if I went to AA, I did those sorts of things personally, I wouldn't have had that big gap that took me so long to fill, and with these vulnerabilities that I'm speaking about now, like I had girlfriends say that to me ad nauseum. You know what I mean? I had a girl once. It was a laugh. I'm sure I told you. Like she called me emotionally retarded, and I was like, it was a laugh. I was like, whatever. No, I'm not. And then I walked away. Like, what do you think? Yeah, of course you are, you dummy.
Matt, when I first met you, I unofficially diagnosed a sociopath, and you wore that as a badge of honor.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You remembered it like 7 years later.
Yeah, but like I was like, it's like,
Yeah.
but to loop it back to Wade saying to me, like, if you'd walked in that
Yes.
person's shoes, you'd be that way. And like when he said that, I didn't think of the person who I was like, you're irritating me. All I could think of was myself and who I used to be. And I
Yes.
was like, motherfucker, you used to do this shit. Like,
Yeah.
you were not a fun person to be around. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you did not say intelligent things. So there has been a laundry list of people looking at you saying things saying, shut your mouth, you're making no sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
But
And I just you cut out like a while back. The last thing I heard was like you're able to be vulnerable in certain, like your vulnerability is okay for you in certain things and not okay for others. And so that really reminded me with the play thing, because I can be vulnerable with my words. Like I can articulate like my darkest behaviors or my messed upness. But if I was to like have to like play in front of somebody with a kid, I turn into like a robot and I can't move and I don't know what to do. And it's this weird thing where it's like I can be super vulnerable with my words, but I can't be vulnerable in a play situation.
completely, Shannon. But
Yeah.
it's because I know how to use words really well.
Yeah, yes, that's what it is.
Like I can rationalize someone till they're blue in the face. If they have a problem, I can help you walk through it. When my kids come up and whatever, right? They
Silly.
anything,
Yeah.
they bring cars up, or like, hey, like my son said to me yesterday morning, he's sitting in the driveway with a Tupperware full of water, and he's gathered up a bunch of our gravel, and he's like, Daddy, come and wash these rocks with me. And the first thought I had was, no, why the fuck would I wash your rocks with you? But then I have these, but I don't say that, obviously. My
Yeah.
brain's like, I want to wash your rocks. And then I'm like, oh, this is one of those moments. Like, you want me to play with you. Like, yes, let's play. But it's, again, my wife is so supportive of me because I'll say those moments out loud to her now. I'll be like, oh, I'm supposed to do this right now. She's like, yes, you are. You're supposed to do that. I'm like, nailed it again.
So you're able to lean, and that's the thing too, is since I've gotten sober, I've been able to lean into, like I went to a retreat, Matthew, and I danced sober
Good for you.
in front of humans. And I gave her.
Good for you.
So yeah, that is tough. Like
It
I can
is.
dance it by myself like nobody's business, but to dance sober and like not worry about how you look or what you're doing. I never danced in front of other human beings sober ever. And so that was like learning to play again in a way, get out of my mind, because if I'm in my mind, I can get vulnerable, but that way was huge. And it was like a year ago and I haven't played or I'm back to horseback riding. So to me, that's kind of like a form of play, but the play and the joy, while sober has been a huge step for me. And it's hard. Like it's hard. That stuff is hard for me. So I don't have kids, but I get really uncomfortable when kids want to play with me. So when you were explaining that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense to me.
And like, I don't even try and do it. Like, like I don't get embarrassed. Like if my wife's like, you're fucking this up, I'm not like, no, I'm not. I'm like, okay.
You're like, yeah, I am.
I'm like, but if I honestly, God, if I don't understand it, I'll be like, what should I be doing? And she'll be like, this is what you should be doing. And it takes me a second, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should be doing that. And like an example is, I do a lot of jujitsu, and my 3.5-year-old is just starting to participate, and he'll be running around while we're doing jujitsu, and I don't understand that I'm supposed to be playing with him in that moment. Like I don't understand.
Right.
He's running around. He's playing with himself. Dad's busy, and my wife will walk out and be like, "Okay." Is she so appropriate? Like I wish I was appropriate as she was. She'll just casually say like, "Okay, next round, Dad's gonna roll with Dad's gonna roll with you, and that's what's gonna happen." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I missed that." Like he wants me to do that with him, but think that I'm supposed to be working out with these people, and it's this weird gap. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's super super duper strange, but I'm getting past it, and I'm getting better for it. But it's a real sort of God moment for me every time it happens. It's like leaning into those small moments and not pushing against them. Like I think my whole life was that, right? Like push against it. Nope, don't need it. Nope, don't need it. Nope, don't need it. Someone would say like, you should,
Yeah.
Lighten up, do this. I'd be like, nope, don't need it. Nope, don't need it. And, but I can't remember that Christian line, let go and let God. Yeah. Like they got that thing right, at least.
Well, and that's what the part of like the surrender and not trying to control everything. Especially my image. Like I try to control my image a lot, like not just like a vanity thing, but just how people perceive me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get out of that, like with something that's like playing or anything like that, I think I'm closer to God. Like when I'm not in my mind trying to manage everybody's perception and life and my own perception of things too, right? Like it's like let go and let God is something that I try to say a lot, but I don't believe it a lot of the time. But I still say it, and I'm trying to let go and let God right now, because right now I feel like I'm rambling. So I am like, let you do your thing if you need to wrap this up. But I'm all of a sudden getting like I need to manage it.
Well, yeah, but I think. Do you think that's a thing that plagues addicts, or do you think that's?
I think it has to do with. I think it plagues addicts for sure, but I think also like I'm a codependent as well, so I have an over sense of responsibility. So there are these like amazing alcoholics that like feel responsible for nothing while they're in their addiction, and like it's everybody else's fault and the world's against them. I was never one of those. I was like, it was all my fault and everything's my responsibility. So I think that it comes from like childhood trauma too, and just just this sense of over responsibility. But I have met people that are addicts that don't blame themselves for anything. At all.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that healthy?
No, it's the other end of the spectrum.
They don't. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant they don't. I heard that differently. I heard like they don't. Like what I heard from that was they don't blame themselves for anything that they shouldn't be blaming themselves for.
Oh.
You're saying like they burnt the house down and they're not my problem.
It was the neighbor's fault because they gave me a lighter. That's what I mean.
And I'm not laughing at that person. I'm laughing because not too many years ago, that would have been sound logic to me. Like,
right?
You shouldn't have given me that lighter. I wouldn't have burnt your shed down.
Yes, exactly. Where the way that I grew up and like my kind of like codependents are their own type of crazy, where I would think that I had said something that made that person give me a lighter, and like it would be like I'm so arrogant about how powerful I am that I don't know what is mine and what is somebody else's. So that wasn't a good example, but oh no, I got one. If I gave you a lighter and you burnt your house down, Matthew, I would feel like it was my fault.
Well, it was your fault. You gave me the lighter.
Exactly. So this is the codependent addict. So I've got both. I'm a double winner, as they say.
Wow. I feel like I have some of that too, Shannon. I feel like maybe I should explore that a little bit.
Oh, do it. It'll be fun. So anyways, over sense of responsibility is coming up where I'm like starting to think like, am I rambling too much? And should should I give you a moment to talk so that you can shut? Like, I'm all up in my head now, and I don't have the sunlight of the spirit. Okay? What's happening?
Shannon, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self, like just into adulthood? Like, what piece of advice would you have given to 17, 18-year-old Shannon Sadgrove about where you are now with God, with your life, with relationships, with sobriety? What's the one thing that if you could commune with yourself, what would you have said or say?
Oh, the thing that comes up for me for some reason immediately without me trying to think about it is you're not too much. You're not too much. Mm-hmm. Because I think for so many years, I thought I was too much in every way, that I would try to numb things out or change who I was. And I think what I've really, like, when I'm really in a place where I'm connected, God made me exactly who I am. Mm-hmm. And there's no mistakes in God's world. So that's what I've learned through the big book too, is like, there's no mistakes in God's world. And I'm not a mistake. The person who's annoying me isn't a mistake. Mm-hmm. And acceptance is apparently the answer to all my problems, it says, but I've only gotten some. So in the big book, it's acceptance is all the answer to all my problems. And so when I say I'm not too much, it's like that girl who is struggling so hard to deal with the big feelings and the big thoughts and the deep questions and all the things that I was told that I was too much, that I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so, because I'm not too much for God. Mm-hmm. Even when I was literally too much, when I was drinking like an animal. Mm-hmm. I was never too much for him, her, or whatevs, but you're not too much, and you are always loved, I guess, is what I've learned from my connection with my higher power, is that I am always loved, even when people in my life aren't loving me. Mm-hmm.
That's a very profound realization to come to, Shannon.
Yeah, it's fleeting.
That's a
it comes and goes.
What is the did we leave anything out, Shannon? Is there anything you'd like to say, sort of in closing? Anything we left out, or anything you'd like to add to before we wrap it up?
No, I think everything that I said was what I was supposed to say. And I think I heard everything that I needed to hear. And I'm just really grateful for this. This is amazing, Matthew. Like, what a cool thing. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Shannon, for telling your story to a computer and a microphone so other people get to rip it apart and judge you for it.
Yes. Get all up in your juicy self-righteousness, audience. No, I'm just kidding.
But no, thank you, Shannon, for saying the things you did. It takes a lot for people to. We all have these moments with God, and we all have these moments with Spirit, and nobody talks about them.
Yeah.
Like, nobody ever says, you've never, you know what I mean? You'll ask someone what the weather was like, but you'll never be like, when was the last time you talked to God? You'd be like, yeah. What'd you ask me?
Yes.
Like,
unless you're surrounded with people that, like, literally, if I call and say to somebody in my support group that I'm having a horrible time, mm-hmm. and they'll be like, when was the last time you prayed? Right?
Mm-hmm. Completely.
But that's not my whole life. That's only a section of my life of people mm-hmm. that say something like that to me.
Yep. No, I know exactly what you mean. But thank you, Shannon. Thank you for the conversation. I hope all of you listening enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. Shannon, we will do this again. Our stories are too parallel to not carry on with this one. I think you and I both have more hours of conversing we could do to reconcile things we've thought, but we've never thought that much about. I know I said some things tonight I don't know if I ever thought about before. It just sort of happened as a part of this conversation. So
totally. And I hope that it was okay that a lot of my experience with God is so intertwined with my sobriety, right? So that's kind of where it went.
Of course it's fine. That's sort of the point, right? That's completely the only reason that I wanted to do this, was that everyone's story is different, but everyone that has an experience with God feels like it needs to look a certain way. And when you hear someone else's experience, it becomes a totally different thing. If a person can explain in 2-3 hours about their experience of God, it becomes undeniable. It can be a deniable thing if someone says, like, I found God through AA. If a person understands God to be like a serpent flying out of the sky when you're high on acid, that is not a thing to you,
right,
unless you hear that person's story and then you're like, that's a thing. I totally understand that. So thank you, Shannon. Thank you for expressing who you are. I really appreciate you. We've been friends a long time. I'm glad we had this conversation. I haven't talked to you in ages. So
yes.
So thank you. And thank you all for listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.